Morning Blues for January the 31st, 2025. Yes, we are finally at the end of January and Chelsea still haven't signed a player or even sold Cesare Casadei, which I think is kind of the more comical side of it. Yeah, Casadei is still in negotiations and there's no green light for his transfer apparently, which kind of sums up this month in so many ways. In today's show, the last time I was on camera, the last time I recorded a show, we were speaking about Jhon Duran, and obviously since then he has moved to Saudi Arabia. In quite a stunning move, he is the latest to depart and take probably a very favourable wage and the potential of a lot of money. Not great football, but a lot of money, and I think that's understandable for some players. But obviously there's been a lot of fallout to that, and in terms of where Chelsea's potential striker options lie now, it's kind of being left to David Datcher Fofana having his loan contract terminated, returning, but apparently he's injured. Potential loans for Evan Ferguson. Maybe there's another one out there, but I have to say at this point, I was having a conversation with my dad yesterday, who's obviously basically the reason I'm a Chelsea fan. And we were both obviously talking about the January transfer window. And I think both of us, and I think a lot of people now, are kind of resigned to the reality that there probably isn't going to be a new player coming in. Now, I have seen a counter narrative to this that we're going to get into that I do think is quite interesting. And I sympathise with this belief over actually this window not being as horrendous. Which the reason why people are giving is kind of quite depressing, but I understand it. So we're going to look firstly at a lot of, again, the briefing wars, because that is what Chelsea Football Club is. It's all about briefing, counter briefing, and how so many people are now just not believing anything the club tries to sell anymore, which I think is good, because I think it's nice that people are waking up to reality, but kind of sums up how ludicrous a lot of the situation is. I want to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Do you think, question of the day for this Friday, do you think Chelsea are going to sign anyone between now and transfer deadline day? Doesn't have to be a specific position. Do you just think anyone? Do we count recalls in there? Maybe you can use a recall if you want, because there's still a potential of a recall for at least one player. But yeah, we're down to the final days now, and still nothing seems to be materialising whilst other clubs are moving. So, Jhon Duran, obviously, there's a lot of reaction to this. And one of them from a Matt Law piece, specifically more so about Duran and Aston Villa, and obviously Matt Law's an Aston Villa fan, so obviously a lot of information around what this means for Aston Villa. But in that piece, it's understood that Chelsea were one of the clubs who dropped their interest in Duran after carrying out due diligence on his character and temperament. So Alex Goldberg, who's been on a tear recently, and I've got to give respect to Alex, because I know in the past he's been maybe a little bit more favourable to Clearlake, or just more sympathetic to the sporting directors. And we have some disagreements, but I think that it's been pretty notable how, given how well connected he is, how vocal he's been this month against the club and specifically the sporting directors. And in full caps, this was him last night. Don't believe the lies. Jhon Duran rejected Chelsea this month when they inquired, and now we are briefing that we didn't want him. The same thing that happened with Elise and could happen with Tel. Shameless club. Noble, you've got to take what Alex says seriously, because as I said, this is a guy who has proven that he does have good connections, and it's not surprising to me that the club are trying to warp reality again. You know, the thing with Jhon Duran is, just from a reality point of view, and just looking at the series of events, if you have an issue, because this temperament thing came up during the summer, so that was also briefed at the same time. And maybe people think we have short memories. Unfortunately, I don't have a short memory, and I do remember some of this stuff during the summer. And if you have a problem or deep concerns about a character and temperament of a player, you don't usually go back in for them after that, which is what Chelsea clearly did. And now we are hearing that for several players, there's actually not that much interest in moving to Chelsea. Tel, this has been reported widely, that Tel is not actually that interested in moving to Chelsea. The reason being given is there's a lot of striker and kind of forward options at the moment, and he feels maybe there's a better chance of moving to Spurs, who apparently are in for him seriously, and other clubs too in the Premier League. It's not a good look for Chelsea. And I think, again, it just symbolises how much of a mess the current situation is. Now, I was a fan of Jhon Duran. I thought he would have been a really good signing. People were kind of, taking the stance now that, we never wanted him in the first place because he's moved to Saudi, and doesn't that show his character? And, maybe it does. Maybe it shows someone who doesn't have like that really hungry motivation to be an elite player at the elite level. I personally believe that the Saudi experiment, despite having a lot of money and it's all building up to their World Cup, there's a lot of sports washing and political reasoning behind how much money is being ploughed into the game at the moment, and probably getting them to a stage in 2034 where that league is a lot more prosperous and a lot more inviting for more European players to make that jump. I personally believe the quality of that league is so poor, despite some of the big names they have, that I can't see it getting much better. And I think that some of these players, especially younger players, will be making a move back to Europe in some capacity in the upcoming years. I may be wrong, but that's just my theory at the moment. I think at the moment it serves more as a great paycheck for especially older players, like we're seeing with Ronaldo, and Kante went there as well, Benzema. So that's what I think of that league. But we talk about the controllables and we talk about Chelsea, right? They went in for this player multiple times and failed. And what does that say about the club? What does that say about our negotiating skills? Alex also went on to say, when he talked about Elise, that was another mess in the summer, where why couldn't we get Michael Elise over the line? Why couldn't we get a player who would have, I think, objectively been a really, really good signing on the right side of our attack? And apparently, from what Alex understands, it went from Joe Shields dealing with the situation to our sporting directors, Win Stanley and Stewart, dealing with the situation, and then it going south very quickly. I don't contest that, because from what I've heard with other negotiations, that has been a problem before. So I believe that was, I believe more so in the percentage-wise that was probably accurate, right? And it just, again, you don't even have to be an insider. You just look at the way Chelsea have handled their transfer business, and you probably put two and two together and go, yeah, I think that probably makes sense. So I don't think that's a ludicrous suggestion or theory regarding why some of these deals and a lot of these deals keep falling. And I think, as I've mentioned in my last Morning Blues, I believe, or one of the shows recently, it's quite concerning now that the likes of Duran, the likes of Mathys Tel, younger players are now, even younger players who a lot of this project, as it's being framed, is sold on, of bringing these players in who haven't done big things yet. Mathys Tel, for whatever people hype him up to be, has not really done anything. Like, he's not in the Bayern first team, really. He is someone who has potential, and that is what a lot of Chelsea's transfer business has been about. If even those players are now turning around and saying, nah, thanks, and I'll go somewhere else, alarm bells should be ringing. And I think that as Chelsea fans, and as any fan of a football club, we live in our bubbles, right? And we live in our echo chambers. And, we think, and rightly so, I'm not saying this is wrong, we consider that our club is the centre of the universe. But it also sometimes means that people kind of discuss Chelsea as if we live in a vacuum, and whatever happens in Chelsea is isolated. Players will, within Chelsea, outside of Chelsea, have contacts within Chelsea. Players speak to each other. Players will see what happens at other clubs. They'll speak to agents, they'll speak to coaches, maybe former players, current players, and they will have an idea of the temperature at Chelsea. And maybe that leads some players to look at the treatment of some players at Chelsea, young players, promising players. I can only imagine if I'm maybe in the type of profile or ascendancy that, say, Christopher Nkunku was a few years ago, and look at how Nkunku at Chelsea has worked out, and kind of ponder to myself, do I really want to go there and potentially be exiled or kind of a second choice understudy when I could go somewhere else and actually be a serious player? That is something that clearly is being impacted, and these long contracts, or the way players are being thrown into the bomb squad. It's why I think the bomb squad thing is just a self defeating exercise, because not only does it lower the value of players, I can only imagine that some players are quite concerned they're going to end up in the same way if suddenly the sporting directors have a instant change of heart, or you bring in a coach who you brief suddenly doesn't rate those players, even though they have never worked with them before. So there's a lot that goes into this. However, there is a counter argument to this, and I've heard it from people I respect, the likes of Ollie Glanville, Parth, who does a lot of great work on the Chelsea youth team, Chelsea youth himself, that actually this window has been quite good for Chelsea, and the reason being is we've not made any signings. Like, we haven't actually signed wrong players, signed bad players, done what we've done in previous windows, added more clutter to the mix. And the players we have got rid of or are looking to get rid of are probably the right ones, to be honest. You know, Joao Felix, is it the end of the world if he moves on? Probably not. Axel Disasi, absolutely not. And I understand that completely. The only big thing was, we brought back Trevor Chalobah, which I think was a smart decision. Now, I do think that in a sense is a massive indictment on the club, that people have lost so much faith and have absolutely no trust or belief that whenever we make a move in the window, it's going to be the right one. And actually, damage limitation at this point. Don't sign anyone. Just, stay the path, and hopefully between now and the end of the season, everything will be okay. The fact that is where some people's positive about this window is, I think, says so much about where the squad and people's overall perception of Chelsea's transfer policy is. And it's a premise I've had that, yeah, sure, there are certain players like a Duran and others that we could look at and I go, yeah, I could see that being a good player for Chelsea. But I have to then conflict that with what I personally believe about our overall transfer strategy, our negotiating skills, how we handle one player versus another, and how Robert Sanchez is our first choice goalkeeper, and how that reflects so much about where priorities are probably misaligned. And actually, if my belief, which I think is not just a wild theory, I think could be proven out by a lot of evidence, that I don't always think our transfer business is based on what makes us a better football team, then, am I being naive by actually asking, let's do this, let's do that? Because if the starting premise is a flawed one, it doesn't matter who you sign, really. Like, one player is not going to change everything if the system itself is flawed. So that's the question I want to ask you. It's not a positive window, because I think it's exposed a lot of problems within Chelsea, and it's kind of done what the summer did, in the sense that it makes it look like a real fast situation. Even the Trevor Chalobah one, which ended in the right choice of bringing Trevor back, it exposed a lot of the incompetence internally. So that in itself is something to think of. Between now and deadline day, I'll make this clear, Chelsea could sign Mathys Tel, let's say. That's like the most obvious one. We maybe sign Evan Ferguson, right? And I'm sure some people will instantly be swayed back, because some people have a addiction to transfers. I'm personally not at this stage. I'm at a stage where one player, one win can't change everything. And there is such core issues at Chelsea that I think it'd be hypocritical to suddenly turn on a dime and say everything's great. Because as well, when I hear opportunity within the market, that doesn't sound like sound transfer strategy, in my opinion. Like, you should not just be going for opportunities, and you should be going for players that actually fit what you're trying to do as a football club. And it's either it's unclear what that actually is. Is that falling down? Does that have anything to do with football on the pitch? I'm not entirely sure. So that is where we are. And I just kind of asked the question, what are Chelsea doing? So you're kind of left in this position where, do I want Chelsea to make a move because the serious options have either moved on or doesn't look realistic, and we're going to, Tel, does he just add more clutter to what we currently have? And in 6 months' time, we're asking a similar question about him as we are currently about Joao Felix, because Joao Felix looks like he maybe wants to move on. This is from Duncan Castles, and I know some people have a bad reputation of Duncan Castles. The thing that also Alex Goldberg said, and I think is fair, this is a guy who's reported accurately about George Mendes clients before, even like someone like Jose Mourinho. So maybe there is legitimacy to it. Again, says a lot. I was surprised the other day when I found out that it wasn't 30 something million, it was 40 something million for Joao Felix, which I just find absolutely staggering. I wouldn't lose much sleep about Joao Felix leaving Chelsea, to be honest, and I don't think you should either. But I think many people will be asking the question, if he moves on, why aren't we bringing someone in? Or you promote Tyreek George, which I think would be a great thing to see for the rest of the season. Or you seriously start to add Christopher Nkunku to your first team plans, which I just still don't understand why we're not doing. I know his performances recently off the bench have not been great. However, maybe this is more Maresca. I just don't understand how you have a guy like Christopher Nkunku and you just don't try and make it work. I don't get that at all. I really don't, with his quality in front of goal. I just think it's incompetence. I just think it's malpractice. I just don't understand it. If Nkunku gets a serious run in the first team and fails, then we sit here and have a different conversation about the player. But until that happens, I'm going to be sitting here very baffled, especially when Chelsea have been seriously struggling recently. So that is it for Morning Blues. Listen, I know a lot of the time I sit here and I am critical about Chelsea and it sounds like I'm being negative about the club, but I don't think I'm alone on this. And, I'd rather just give you honest takes and the takes of you as well in the comments. Like your responses to the club currently are kind of where I am. So it's not like I'm a lone person on an island, screaming into old man yelling at a cloud here. I think a lot of people are waking up to the problems within Chelsea, and I think it's more beneficial for us to be honest about those rather than kind of live in fantasy land, which I know some people want to. Listen, I like to, but it's where we are currently. But I am interested to hear your thoughts, whether you're kind of at a stage now because of the concerns, deep concerns over our strategy and sporting directors and their judgment and what they're working for, what they're working towards, whether actually you're at a stage now where is it actually a better thing if we don't sign anyone? Maybe we recall Andre Santos or Ugo Chukwu, which I think we should. And that's it, because you don't want to create more damage, especially if we believe that the sporting directors should no longer be in place. So that is it for this Friday. We'll be back over the weekend to not only react to Chelsea news, but also I'll be giving you my team selector and preview for the West Ham game on Monday. So I think I'll be shooting that around Sunday, so that'll be out before the Monday night game. So let me know your thoughts. Follow across the socials. Have a great Friday, and I will see you again very soon. All the best.